Now, having learned everything that we've looked at so far, the thought may occur that using the multiplier effect, we wish to have the best of all worlds and link the step forward with the explosivity of the on-the-spot illusion jab. Can this be done? Yes. The skill is not necessarily easy and it requires us to float the back leg forward. This makes a posture vulnerable to sweeping, but so does any kind of fancy footwork. However, it has lots of uses, particularly in defence, so we should definitely practice it and try to get it. Watch the footwork carefully, and in our classic Yiquan style, we try to compound the movement, cheating a little bit of each one, dragging the front foot back, and then shifting all of our weight forwards, almost like a little skip. This is very much like doing the posture where we just change our stance on the spot, but it adds in a little step forward, so it's the best of both worlds. It's a nifty little technique, but it's harder than it looks and it's well worth practicing. And as always, there's a compromise. We don't go quite as far as we do when we do 2 steps. In fact, it's just 1 and a bit steps, but we compensate for that with more explosivity behind the punch. Look and listen carefully as we compare the 2 variations. Now, let's think of some different variations. First, jab on the spot and then step in cross. In this case, we immediately face a similar problem to the earlier example where we lost power in favour of speed. However, the issue here is that the structural sympathy between the jab and the step in cross is poor. That is, if we emphasise power in the jab, we use the pivot's root. Shifting the pivot route back into line for the stepping cross is time consuming and awkward. Instead of our timing being 1, 2, we'll have slowed back down again to 1 and 2. In fact, the relaxed back of the pivot route is just the lower part, i.e. what the feet are doing of the return to guard posture. So it's the same issue as doing jab cross on the spot. Remember from the beginner series, we have to compound even the basic jab cross, because if we do a full pivot route with the jab, it slows down the overall speed of the combination. We always have to make these decisions between power and speed. And this isn't just about actual practical use. We have to think about this even if we're just practicing our combinations on their own. Being able to vary where we emphasize speed or power is an absolute fundamental basic skill. It can't be compensated for by the old style of Yiquan where only the last punch or a single punch is emphasized. That's just not sufficient for the modern world of martial arts. And remember, how many times have I said, the mistake comes first, the justification comes after. The justification in this case is people saying, oh, but a real fight is over in 3 seconds. A real fight is over in 1, 2 or 3 movements. Not only is this often used as a justification for considerable lack of fitness and conditioning, it's also used as a justification for not being able to use Yiquan principles in more complicated, more sophisticated combinations. Don't fall into that trap. Now, it's not necessarily a problem to hit harder with one punch, for example, the lead jab. Hitting harder with the jab could well be the right call, and in the split second of the hit, you will likely have enough time to switch the route back and then go for the stepping cross. So we should practice some like this. But let's assume now that Once again, we want to focus on speed, so we want to maintain the clean 1-2 timing between jab and cross. To do this, we need to sacrifice power and reduce the pivot route to just a slight heel lift. While some say that the pivot routes are contrary to Yiquan, we can demonstrate scientifically that that is incorrect. One of the most important reasons we lift the heel is to release the stress on the twisting side of the body, which aids power generation and is more ergonomically aligned with average natural physiology. As we've mentioned before, stabilizes the movement, adds speed and permits a higher level of force generation potential, which we'll discuss separately. From the slight heel lift, we can also shoot forwards into the cross more effectively, maintaining a 1-2 timing. The difficulty is knowing when to pivot or not to pivot. Actually, it's more difficult than that. There are infinite degrees and variations of pivot. We need to develop an intuitive ability to do the right thing, dependent on the moment and dependent on the intent. But that's not all that difficult to get with diligent practice. So again, beware these people who make it seem much more complicated than it really is. People who are selling you something always have a vested interest in making it seem much more complicated. Actually, with diligent practice, it doesn't take that long to start developing the intuitive ability to make the right call. In fact, it's your body that does it. In the Chinese saying, it's thinking skin. Your body makes the right call without you having to think about it at all. It doesn't take all that much training to get to that point. Okay, let's try a few with power and see what that looks like. And also, remember to listen. Listen to the timing. Remember, by the way, that Yiquan punches can be very deceptive when performed on the air. They never really look that powerful. This is because, as Wang Xiangjai himself explains specifically, you have to think about contact with the opponent or the target. This is a vital part of the laws of physics that apply when using structural movement. Once you hit the target, that creates what we call a whole body compression set. And you can see that when I'm practicing on the bag. It's exactly the same postures that I'm doing on the air, but they look completely different in terms of power. Now, something else to keep in mind. Be very careful when you step not to overbalance. The bend of the body at the waist is very important for creating the compression set on the lead leg, as we've looked at before in our videos on the natural set. But you have to combine this with keeping light on your feet, and that can be very hard to understand at first. If you just take a normal step and you lean your body too far forwards, in fact even if you don't, just with a normal step, it's quite easy to slide, particularly if you land on your heel. Adding a little bit of a jump in the posture makes your body land much more lightly, much more lively. This is the real light body skill. Now, let's use the multiplier effect to expand further our knowledge of the infinite curriculum. And all we're going to do is do the same posture, but on the spot. And here's where you've really got to start thinking about timing, because this isn't like the posture we did before, where we just switched our stance on the spot. This time we need to land relatively flat-footed, so it makes it even more important not to lean our weight too far forwards. The more weight there is on the heel, the more chance of slipping. And to understand the reason for this, remember that when we did the on-the-spot illusion jab, we landed on the ball of our foot in an empty stance. This is partly to do with the nature of the posture, as we've discussed, i.e. it's a jab, but more importantly in this instance is what we call a perfect harmony. This means that the intended point of contact with the opponent and the set of the posture both happen at the same time. In simpler terms, the foot and the hand land together, although just stepping doesn't make something a set. But our new posture has a split harmony. This means that the point where we set the posture is separate in time to the point where we release force and hit the opponent. Although by now, as intermediate learners, we should be aware that setting is a complicated event that happens across both feet. So in this case, the secondary set is the rear foot lifting up onto the pivot root and pushing forwards. And as we should also all understand at this point, this helps to create a compression set by pushing down on the lead foot. So with a split harmony, setting a posture becomes a more complex event stretched out over time. The push down onto the front foot helps to solidify the posture. And that also means that our weight has to be balanced correctly, and we also have to release force from the quad area, pushing down with our chest and creating that compression set down into the floor. And this means we need to upgrade our ability to use footwork, moving between flat-footed landings, it's not completely flat-footed, remember, on the ball of the foot, and then switching into the pivot root. It's a little bit of a knack that you've got to get, and remember, everything has to be timed with the Farley, and that's the essence of setting a posture. With some practice you can get it, no problem. Note carefully all of the elements, landing slightly on the ball of the foot, not flat-footed, and then just a little bit of release force from the waist to create the compression set. And from there, follow the timing. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Once you get that timing, it will help you to do the posture correctly. And it will also help you feel intuitively through the rhythm what we mean by a split harmony.